Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. In this video, I'm going to do a side-by-side breakdown of the original Lost Mine of Phandelver versus the changes made in Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. I'll be focusing this video specifically on the first half of the Shattered Obelisk, which is basically just a remaster of the original starter adventure, Lost Mine of Phandelver. If you want my review of Shattered Obelisk in general, and specifically the second half, which is all entirely new content, then you're going to want to check out my Roll20 review of Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. So, it basically doesn't change anything of the story from Lost Mine of Phandelver. I mean, it still has the first 4 chapters. You start off following Gundren Rockseeker for to get to on your way to Fandalin. It changes a few encounters. I'm going to go over specific maps and token changes and any kind of replacement for creatures that are used. It doesn't change a whole lot, and nothing is changed of the basic story, which is kind of light on story. But I mean, Lost Mine of Phandelver is still a classic adventure that is recommended for a lot of new DMs. It also checks a lot of boxes for a D&D adventure. It's got some good combat opportunities, some great role-playing, NPCs to interact with, just some classic battles of bugbears and goblins and jellies and undead creatures, and some good dungeon crawls, and that's pretty much what you need. All the ingredients are there for a good D&D adventure. It's still split in those 4 chapters, with chapter 1 has again, you're following Gundren Rockseeker. I guess you're supposed to be escorting somebody, but I guess the escort is ahead of you, so you're catching up to them, and you have to rescue Sildar from the Cragmaw hideout, and then you learn that Gundren's gone missing, and there's been an attack, and it's all about this big dungeon called Wave Echo Cave, which has been recently discovered, but you're still trying to find it. You, the party, are trying to find out, just how much the bad guys know about it, which bad guys are just kind of a generic goblin tribe with some hobgoblins and stuff in there. Chapter 2 is centered around the town of Fandalin, doing a lot of side quests chapter 2 is not the side quest yet. Chapter 2 is just freeing the town from Redbrand ruffians, which they do change that stat block, and I will show that to you in the Shattered Obelisk, and doing the cool Redbrand hideout, which is my favorite dungeon crawls. And then chapter 3 is doing all the various quests and things around the Phandalin area, Old Alwell, Wyvern Tor, the ruins of Thundertree, and the big Cragmaw Castle, where you finally find Gundren Rockseeker, and then that can lead you to the final chapter of Wave Echo Cave. All of that is basically the exact same. It might be organized slightly differently than in Lost Mine of Phandelver, and yes, part of this video, I'm going to be going back and forth between the original adventure, which again released in 2014 and is still, I think, only like $15 or something on the Roll20 marketplace, and then the recently released Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk, which is a lot more expensive but is a lot bigger and basically includes all of Lost Mine of Phandelver plus additional maps, different tokens, and then the entire second half of the adventure. But I just thought it'd be interesting, and big shout out to patron, fan of the show, and fellow D&D content creator Tal Aviezer, who recommended making this comparison video between exactly what they changed between Lost Mine of Phandelver and Shattered Obelisk. We've had almost 10 years to look at how to change either story elements or like rebalancing things, for example. And that's what I'll be doing with this video, starting with chapter 1, which is called A Dangerous Journey. So the biggest thing they change is probably within the Cragmaw hideout, but we can look at the Goblin ambush. They change... The horses are no longer dead, so we need a new map. So this is the original Lost Mine of Phandelver map right here, and you come across a bunch of dead horses with arrows sticking out of them, and then the 4 goblins ambush the party. In the new version, basically the same thing happens, but the horses are no longer dead, they're just alive, so yay. But we still are ambushed by a foursome of goblins. Now, the goblin tokens, which you'll be able to see better of in the Cragmaw hideout, are a lot more improved. Instead of having the 1 generic goblin token, there's like 30,000 goblin tokens that you can use as part of this multi-sided token thing. Basically, they just used a crap ton of goblins in this new version, and there's a lot of new goblin artwork, and Roll20 has taken all of those pieces of art and cropped them into tokens, and then created 1 mega token that you can then change on the fly to any of these different pieces of art, which is really cool and makes fighting goblins a lot more interesting than always seeing that same that same picture that we've all become accustomed to. This is still a very deadly encounter, by the way. Surprise round is a hell of a thing in 5th edition, and I think a lot of DMs and players who are new to 5e are probably not going to be prepared for just how bad a surprise round can go, and goblins can be kind of tricky. They're not very strong, but they can do the whole disengage, hide, and generally be just a complete pain in the ass to fight, especially if the players are just blundering into a trap like this. So it's interesting that they decided not to change any of this, even though I'd be very worried because the players start this at level 1. And again, I think this is just a kind of a challenging encounter, but we were able to survive it. Now, I'm going to talk about anecdotes from my playthrough, but also keep in mind we played through this back in 2015. In fact, you can go see that playthrough here on the YouTube channel, where it's very, very early in our D&D content careers, I guess, or hobbies. And we did not know half the things how to do D&D, but the playthrough is there, and I will try to remember all the things that we did. Cragmaw Hideout is going to be a better example of the changes that they made, mainly because when we did this starter adventure, they only had final access, I guess, whatever you want to call it, final run through on certain creatures. So the starter kit only comes with, I don't know how many, maybe 20 different monster stat blocks or so, and all of them are used here, whereas obviously the monster manual has dozens and dozens. So one of the things they can change is using different kinds of additional monsters in this adventure. The biggest difference then is that the new version uses goblin bosses as a different stat block, because before it would just say, well, this is a goblin with 12 hit points or something. It'd be a goblin that's like slightly stronger with more hit points. I thought it was supposed to be, Yimik here. It's supposed to be a stronger goblin with more hit points, and then this one is actually using the goblin boss stat block. Now that's something you're going to see throughout the new version, is the addition of these goblin bosses, which are significantly more powerful than a regular goblin. They've got more AC, they've got 3 times the hit points. It's got a redirect where it can like put another goblin in place to take the hit. It's got a ranged attack with the javelins, and it has multi-attack, although the second attack is with disadvantage, which is kind of an interesting way of balancing that. But still, the goblin bosses are a lot stronger, and you will find, I think, at least 2 of them here. Yeah, I think there's just the 2 of them. One outside, which is just complete addition. And then there's one in here guarding Sildar. And the other different new additions, we've got this giant poisonous snake here in the kind of little slope area. The players can scramble up this cliffside. I don't think we needed any more. I don't think we needed to make this area more challenging. This is a level 1 dungeon, and it's already packed full of monsters. So I'm kind of surprised that they added a giant poisonous snake there. They still have wolves chained up in the kennel. I believe there's additional wolves up here. This used to be just goblins. And then the boss fight, I think, is generally still the same. It still has the 1 bugbear, which, again, very, very hard for level 1 players. 2 goblins and a wolf. I think that's actually the same. Yeah, it is. This one's darker, by the way, just because the way the dynamic lighting is looked, and I believe because some of these may have vision turned on. I'm not sure. Or maybe the lighting is just set up a little bit differently. But you'll notice there's kind of a dark light thing going on with as I switch to the different maps. So right away, Cragmaw Hideout is more difficult because it adds the goblin bosses. Sometimes it replaces a goblin with a goblin boss, but that's already making it harder, or adds them. And it added wolves into this area here, and then it added the giant poisonous snake. That's a lot of new monsters and stronger monsters. I can't say I agree with all those changes. I think that makes a very monstery heavy level 1 dungeon even more monster heavy, and it's an odd change. I think if you were going to add some goblin bosses, you should probably reduce the number of goblins or change something, because again, level 1 is really rough. For chapter 2, this is, do we not have a encounter? I thought we had an encounter map for the Redbrand, because there is a Redbrand cutscene where they're supposed to fight with them. Trezendar Manor, which is this. Yeah, it's supposed to be in the street. Okay. I guess you could always reuse one of these street, which is the new maps they added with the second half of the adventure, because you're supposed to investigate the Psy Goblins. So I don't have a map for that necessarily, but you could reuse Fandalin alleyways, rooftop stash, one of these that takes place in there. The big change they make for chapter 2 isn't so much in the dungeon crawl, it's that they changed the Redbrand ruffian stat block significantly. So we'll go to Redbrand Hideout to see on both of them. So Redbrand, I love this dungeon, by the way. This dungeon is fantastic. It's It's so fun. It's just it's a if I was teaching D&D like game design or something, I would hold up Redbrand hideout as one of the masters of just simple but effective dungeon crawl that's got just cool stuff in there. It's got traps, it's got prisoners you can rescue, it's got some undead guards, it's got a bunch of bandits hanging out. There's that cool Nothic creature, which is such a creepy thing, and it's introduced in such a creepy way in this crevice with a bunch of dead bodies down there. Glassstaff is a boss who can flee at the end. That's probably the only weak part about it, is the fact that it's very easy for the actual boss of the dungeon to just escape, and there's no real note on how to deal with him when he does escape. There's a goblin the players can befriend. There's multiple entrances. There's secret doors. It's just a great, I don't mean to go off on a rant here, but it's still a great dungeon crawl, honestly. So we're looking at the original right now, which is a bunch of the generic Redbrand Ruffian stat blocks and kind of the old token art. So now if you look at the new one, you will see a few changes, but I mainly want to highlight how the Redbrand stat block has changed. So the original Redbrand Ruffian has an AC of 14, hit points of 16, and makes 2 melee attacks, so it's multi-attack with a +4 to hit and an average of 5 damage. All right, that's the original Redbrand Ruffian. Pretty nasty, stronger than a bandit, although doesn't have a ranged attack. But at this level, the players also probably don't have ways of necessarily like locking, the enemy down and taking advantage of that either. The new version, which I believe is given, this art. Again, we get a whole lot of new artwork. I guess I could have used either picture here for all of this stuff. So even the old stuff gets new art, which means that's where they get a lot of the new tokens from. The new one has an AC of 11, so that's far worse AC. Hit points, I believe, are the same at 16. Does not have multi-attack, though, is probably the biggest difference. Still the exact same attack strike, so +4 to hit, 5 damage. So literally just cut their effective offense in half and reduced their defense by lowering their AC. So that is a major change in making the entire hideout a different balance tweak right there. It's very interesting. And then they also went and replaced about half of the red brands that are in this dungeon with the more generic bandit stat block. Now the bandit stat block is weaker, although oddly has one better AC now because the red brands got way reduced AC. But they have fewer hit points. A slightly weaker attack. They do, however, have a ranged attack, which makes them, I guess, a little bit more interesting to battle. But I think it's curious the way that they not only debuffed the red brands quite a bit, but then also replaced about half of them with just the more generic bandit stat block. So that's a major change. Other changes, they doubled the number of skeletons in room R4, where for the longest time I thought the skeletons pop out of the sarcophagus, but they're actually just chilling around here, and they don't do anything until the players try to, like, jack with them or do anything, so it's not like a surprise or anything, but still, that's a great, and this is a level 2, so sorry, chapter 1 was level 1, chapter 2 is level 2, and this is all a level 2 dungeon, so players are very low level. 6 skeletons is pretty brutal, and because we just reduced the red brands, it's probably the hardest fight in this dungeon now against 6 flipping skeletons, so that's kind of crazy. An additional red brand ruffian here, we have proper tokens for Myrna and her 2 kids. I believe the Nothic is the same. They can find goblins of the bodies of the Psy goblins now in the crevice. There are a few little hints to that, by the way, but it's very few and far between where the game tries to, retroactively create those ties to the second half. One of my complaints, though, about when I reviewed Shattered Obelisk was that it doesn't do a good job of continuing any kind of story from Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is already a very weak, bare-bones story, and just kind of creates its entirely new story that happens to be centered around Fandalin. I think it's a really cool story. It involves mind flayers and the Far Realm and just kind of eldritch horror, cool stuff there. But what the few kind of ties they did was they retroactively put in kind of teases of this other creepy goblin tribe who's got like these big heads and these psi powers, mainly in the form of finding their bodies around the place. So it's more just confusing than anything else. I don't necessarily think it's an effective way of tying it together, but that's what it's there for. You still got the 4 bugbears, which is also still a really hard fight. With Droop the Goblin, which some parties probably love him. My party never gave a crap. And then again, we replaced half the ruffians with bandits here. Proper token for Glassstaff, by the way, really cool looking, but he still escapes when he gets a chance. And there's still no real story notes about how to deal with him if he does escape, where he pops up in. So I had him pop up in a kind of a random encounter when the players, I believe, were on their way to Cragmaw Castle, I think, in our game. But again, it's been a while since we played, so interesting way of rebalancing things here, where the Redbrand Ruffian, which is, again, a stat block the players meet a lot, was half taken out and then debuffed quite a bit, and then other areas, mainly the skeleton room, was made significantly more difficult. So that's the Redbrand hideout, and then once they do that, they've freed Fandalin, and now we can go on to Chapter 3, which is running a bunch of the kind of video game style side quests, really. And the biggest difference here, before, I mean, look at the number of maps, not nearly as big, obviously, and I mean, discount the second half of maps in this one, because starting at Well Cavern, that's all the second half of the campaign. There were no maps for Old Owl Well or Wyvern Tor. There was a map for Ruins of Thunder Tree, but it was annoyingly a 1 square equals 10 foot map, so you had to like subdivide it on Roll20 to make it work. So a big improvement already in Chapter 3 is that we get freaking maps for these areas, which were definitely encounters and full of monsters. Old Owlwell had the giant ruined tower full of zombies, and the Red Wizard Hamoon Cost, and the Wyvern Tor, which I think that one's the same as written, was a cave full of orcs. Now, they did change this one. I'm not sure why, and I don't think I like the change, but for some reason they replaced all the orcs with bugbears, except for one, who I think is supposed to have more hit points. I don't know if that's actually correct. Wyvern Tor has an orc with 18 hit points. Okay, so Roll20 just kind of missed that. And it still has the one ogre. I don't know why they changed that. That's, I mean, we're facing bugbears a lot already, right? We've got Bugbear as a boss of Cragmaw Hideout, Bugbear as a boss of Cragmaw Castle, and bugbears you just saw were a 4 group in the Redbrand Hideout. And now all of a sudden we're replacing orcs, which is a good chance to use a slightly different stat block at least, and a creature, with more bugbears. I guess I don't know. I don't understand it. Maybe I skimmed through it and missed the fact that these are just supposed to be part of the Cragmaw tribe or something. I don't quite get it. I don't know why we made this change here. I thought the orcs were fine. I think having them, in fact, bugbears, I believe, are stronger CR wise as well. Yeah, they're CR1. Now the players are level 3 by the time they're doing this, so that's a little better, but bugbears are CR1 with an average of 27 hit points, 16 AC. Orcs, I believe, are 1/2 CR, yeah. And they have their only abilities they can move toward hostile creatures with their average of 18 hit points and a 13 AC. So it makes this significantly more difficult for I don't know what purpose. Seems weird, but I love that we got a map for it. So that's a thumbs up, at least. Thunder Tree, we did have a map for, but I will show you the difference between the two Roll20 maps, and you can tell me if you think it's better or not, because I could see the argument both ways. So this is the original map. It's a 1 square equals 10 foot map, which if you've played 5e for more than 2 seconds, you know does not work. You cannot play a tabletop game without the proper dimensions. So Roll20 has 2 ways of dealing with that. You can either just leave the map the same size and subdivide all the grids to where it's basically creates little mini grids, and that creates tiny tokens. So players would only be the size of, like, you know, these little ones. These are all in the GM layer, by the way, which is why they're kind of grayed out. So everybody's, I guess, hidden here. Here's a good example. So they're 2 super tiny tokens, which is not fun. Or you can do what the new version did, which is blow the map up to double size. And then it becomes, you've got regular size tokens. Unfortunately, you also kind of lose some of the, resolution and quality of the map when you do that. So there's not a good solution here, and it's interesting that Roll20 tried both things, and it's kind of up to you whether you. I've done both ways, honestly. I've done it where when I'm trying to fix maps, I've done it this way where I blow it up and I kind of just look at it and see if I can deal with it, or if I really can't, then I'll go with the subdividing way. I prefer this way. I don't like the tiny tokens, but sometimes the maps get a little too gross looking. This one is kind of like, I wish we had a better resolution here. In terms of the actual makeup of everything, this is also an interesting one where they changed quite a few things. One thing that I don't think I liked the change on, although I get kind of why they maybe changed a little bit, the Ash Zombie, which I haven't seen D&D do this too often since then, where they take a creature and slightly tweak it and they give it like a new ability or something. In this case, the Ash Zombie, which is created from the volcano exploding, every time it takes damage, any creature within melee range has to make a DC 10 con save or gain disadvantage on basically all their things for 1 minute, but you can repeat the save at the end of each turn. It's a major debuff that just auto happens that they have a chance to save against, and it makes it a really interesting creature with that kind of a nasty debuff. So I thought you know, that's pretty cool. That's a way to make this a more unique, interesting foe to face. Even though we haven't really, well, I guess we did fight the zombies in the old Owlwell, so we have fought them. So these are slightly different, even though it uses the same image, because again, we only had so much to work with Lost Mine. So that was the original one, right? The new one, the Ash Zombie, very cool new artwork, by the way, very creepy. Has nothing. I'm sorry to say. It says the zombies were created by magical devastation when Mount Hotno erupted 30 years ago. They used the zombie stat block. When they die, they leave a cloud of ash that lasts for 5 minutes but does not obscure vision. Literally completely lost the ash puff. What a bummer. That's a weird change. Now, granted, I thought the other one, maybe that was too strong because it triggered every time the zombie took damage. If I were probably redoing this, I would look at it and say every time the zombie dies, then it creates this big explosion of puff and everybody has to make the save. So instead of being like the death burst Mephis, which is always a fun creature to use, it kind of uses that puff burst to maybe trigger a debuff. That would be more interesting and probably more balanced than every time you hit them. But to just completely remove it and just use regular zombies, even though we've got a cool art for it and it's even called Ash Zombie, even though there's no difference now, that's lame. So I don't like the loss of that. I would definitely, it makes me sad that people would only play this version and not know that there was another cooler version of the Ash Zombie out there. So I don't agree with the debuff that they got there. Rayadoth is now a woman. That's it. There's no other change there. She has this, for some reason, her token's not on the board, by the way, even though she does have her own artwork. See if I can find it. There it is. Yeah, so she's got cool art, a little fox and things. Like, that's neat. But the token didn't make it on here for some reason. No difference in terms of how she acts. You know, she can tell the player important things and give them a little side quest to clear out the dragon, all that cool stuff if you want to. But otherwise, the character's the same, just a little gender switch. The blights were changed a little bit in terms of the numbers and the amount. I don't know if needle blights existed before, but now we have twig and needle blight combinations. I mean, I've got like patch notes, by the way, of like a bullet point list of things. So room U5 has 4 more twig blights plus 2 needle blights. U2, it was removed 4 blights. And then in U12, it replaced 2 twig blights with needle blights. So various blight changes there. The giant spiders are still there. New loot was added in the giant spider room. One of the bodies now has +1 leather armor. And then 2 more ash zombies, although again, ash, just zombies were added to room U8. The dragon is still the same. Venom Fang, still a young green dragon. You know, all that's pretty much still the same. But yeah, and overall, I don't know what the numbers look like. It feels like there's a lot more blights to deal with. Dragon cultists are still down there as well. And then having to deal with the stronger blight. So I guess it just kind of upped the difficulty a little bit, but again, the ash zombies are not nearly as deadly here. And then Cragmaw Castle, which is the final dungeon of Chapter 3. We can look at this area. So there is a big difference here. Again, it uses the Goblin boss stat block instead of goblins everywhere. As you can see, the original one is just the same goblin everywhere, and then occasionally be like, oh, this goblin has more hit points or something. The new version uses goblin bosses instead of those expanded goblins. I hate when Roll20 does this. I know why they do it. They just say goblin boss archer because there's no art for this. Well, guess what? Just use the art for goblin boss and just give it the name tag goblin boss archer and just hope people are smart enough to look at the stat block. Obviously, make it point to something else. And say, oh, this is, or, you know, tint it differently or something. Do what video games do. Make it a slightly different color to make a different variant. Basically, they're goblin bosses with short bows is the only difference there. So I don't like that they went back to that old using the text on there versus the actual artwork. But, you know, it looks a lot better because the different goblins here. But the addition of the goblin bosses definitely makes things more difficult. There's still the Grick here, another goblin boss up there. The biggest change is in C13, the original, as a lot of people probably remember, is there's an owlbear hanging out here in this random ass side of the castle. It says in the text that like it was captured by the Cragmaws, which bullshit on that. There's no way this tribe of goblins capturing an owlbear, and then stuffed inside this tiny room and just kind of hanging out in there. It really felt like one of those random, like just poorly designed, like it's like a procedurally generated dungeon where it's like you open a room and, you know, rolling the dice. It's an owlbear for some reason is hungry and looking at you like this. And obviously owlbear is like, holy shit, way strong for 3rd level. It's a CR3, average of 59 hit points. It's got multi-attack with an average of 10 damage and a +7 to hit. This thing is a party killer. When I ran it the first time, I believe I ignored its multi-attack, I think on accident, but I'm glad I did because, damn, this thing is nasty, and it's just... it's weird. So I do like the change that was made here, which is now the owlbear's gone. Instead, it's a haunted side of the castle. In fact, I think it's literally the entire room has changed its name and description and everything. And now it's this like haunted tower where the Grell... yeah, the Cragmaws believe the tower is haunted, but they're wrong. The area is the lair of a Grell, a hideous flying monster, which is another cool, classic D&D monster. It's a weird like brain with tentacles and the beak, and it can like paralyze you with its tentacle things, restrain you. Just a neat creature design. Also CR3, fun fact, but a lot more manageable just based on pure damage, and I think it's just a more interesting fight and just fits this room better. So now we finally have a major change that was made to a dungeon room for the better. So thumbs up on replacing the owlbear, even though it's a cool, everybody wants to see the owlbear, but this is not the right place for it. Do an owlbear as a random encounter if you need to. I think they're still included in a possible random encounter versus the Grell here. I'm trying to see what else is the difference. Oh, the wolf is now a dire wolf. But the bugbear boss doesn't have max HP anymore for some reason. So before, he was a bugbear with max HP, 45 hit points, which really using a bugbear again as a boss, like damn. But he just had a regular wolf with him. And then the doppelganger. I don't like that Roll20 didn't really do a good job with the doppelganger that they did with the Goblin token. So now the old one, these are a generic picture of a drow, which works great because a doppelganger turns into a drow a couple times. And also Nundro, which is... okay, I guess we can just have the words Nundro on there. Obviously, we have better tokens for the Dwarf Brothers, but now look at what happens with the Doppelganger. Got way worse token. And unfortunately, there's another Doppelganger used in Wave Echo Cave, so that's kind of a bummer. We do have the actual artwork for turning into Nundro, which is cool, but we couldn't have used like a generic drow there, because that's what they look like, additionally. So interesting, just different version of the boss battle here. I guess an easier bugbear, but the dire wolf's obviously a lot stronger, but I'm not a fan of the Doppelganger change there. All right, finally, what you've all been waiting for, maybe, is if you've lasted this long, Wave Echo Cave, which is the ultimate big mega dungeon crawl that serves as the climax of Lost Mine of Phandelver. What are the differences here? There's actually not a lot. Same with all the dungeons, really. It hasn't been changed that much. The dead brother's body, Gundren's brother, one of his brothers, now has a cloak of protection instead of boots of striding and springing. That's fine, I guess. Cloak of Protection. I think the boots are a fun low-level item, too, and players usually have a lot of fun with those, but Cloak of Protection, obviously just a very, very great item that literally anybody can use and take advantage of. There's now a dead Psy Goblin in the pit, so another use of tying in, very confusingly, the next second half of the adventure with the Psy Goblins. Literally on the map, here's a token. W3, the Sturges got reduced from 10 to 6. Fine. I don't know if that changes much. Sturges aren't that strong. W4 got changed quite a bit. This is just a random empty room with a bunch of skeletons in it, I think, originally. Yeah, it had 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 skeletons that animated and attacked when you walked into this room. That has been changed to 6 zombies and 2 ogre zombies. Probably a good change. Those are at least more interesting. Obviously, I don't like the ogre zombie text here. I believe Cobalt Press is it that had a really good ogre zombie token I'd probably take advantage of. And then for some reason, this is Roll20 error. There's 3 ghouls in W5. Those are supposed to be in W6. And that is, according to the text, they're still in W6. So I don't know why Roll20 just missed that. They put them in 5 instead of 6. 5 is still supposed to be empty. So I guess the change in 4 there. There's still a single ochre jelly roaming around the maze that is Area 2. Area 3, I guess we already did 3, 4, 5. I'm trying to go in order here. 6. We already did 7. Is also empty. 8 no longer has a violet fungus in there. Instead, it has, or no, 8 does have the violet fungus. Wait, really? I missed that then. Let's see. We're in, this is the new one. So W8. Okay, so this is the change. I just had it backwards. The original one, you would walk through, and it was just an AoE environmental hazard, right? It was like you had to avoid some nasty poison damage when you walked through. In the new one, they added just violet fungi, which you can, that just fight you. I don't know if I necessarily like that. Just because we have, this is the Ian Malcolm, just because you have doesn't mean you should. Just because we have this new creature doesn't mean we needed to add another creature. This is also a very creature-heavy dungeon already, and it needed more exploration-type things that players could deal with out of combat. So I'm not necessarily a fan of making this change. I thought the original was actually just fine in terms of the the challenge level it gave the players and having to deal with just a generic environmental hazard versus another monster creature. So I can't say I'm a big fan of that change. Number 9 is there's still ghouls everywhere. I think they're, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What did my notes say? Reduce the ghouls from 7 to 5. So just slightly easier battle when they get to this middle room. Interestingly, the zombie flame skull battle, I believe, was left the same, which I thought that was a major difficulty spike in our adventure, and maybe with others would feel the same way. That thing lobbing, fireballs at people was a huge shock. Fireball obviously is an overtuned spell in general. Did not change at all from this room in the smelter. There's still, I think, the same number of, there's a new bugbear. Added another bugbear to area W11. Also changed the potion of vitality to potion of healing. Pretty minor. They added a giant snake to W10, which was a empty water area where you could, if for some reason somebody was brave enough and just wanted to explore, you could actually find a wand of magic missiles, which is a huge, amazingly useful magic item, especially at low levels, in the bottom of this lake. But now they make you pay for it because there's another giant snake slithering around in there. Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself. There's already a lot of monsters in this dungeon. I really don't need additional monsters. Now, if you wanted to add like a current or something environmental the players had to deal with, that would be different. If you wanted to make it a challenge in some way, but literally just throwing monsters into every single room, I don't know, man. I think we're 4th level by the time we're doing this dungeon, but it just feels it was already kind of monster heavy, and now it's just even more so. So I think they got a little bit like, oh, we've got all these new monsters we can throw in there. Like, I don't necessarily think you should. Mormisk the Wraith and the Spectator are the exact same. No changes were made there. It's an interesting dungeon. I don't necessarily like this one as much as the others, but at least it has multiple, I guess, factions and different enemies that feel logically separated from each other, and you can tell one side trying to get to the other side, for example, and all that's fine. It wasn't broken, so I fix it. Same thing in the other waterway. We had another creature, a giant octopus this time, to area W16. This was an oddly easy way to make it to the right side of the map. If you happen to go, basically, this is such an open map design. You could literally go all the way up the left side, fight the boss if you wanted to, basically, and then go to the right side and deal with the Forge of Spells and not even have to deal with any monsters. But I guess they threw a giant octopus in there to help out. But again, I just think there's a lot of monsters in here in general. I don't think bugbears are still the same up here in the upper area. And then W19, the boss fight, was changed for the worse, I think. Before, let's see, where is... Nope, not Cragmaw Castle, not Wyvern Tor. Where are we? Wave Echo Cave. Number 19. Temple of Dumathoin. So the original one has Nesnar, the drow, accompanied by 4 giant spiders. That's a hell of a memorable boss fight. Spiders can web. They can, I don't know, they're just a pain in the ass with their poison and all that. This time, we got replaced with more bugbears. What is with the bugbears? I don't know. I don't know why whoever did Phandelver and Below was like, oh man, fucking bugbears are just the coolest thing ever, and we're going to use those every chance we get. We're going to replace other, at least different monsters with more bugbears. Like, why? Why would you do that? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think the giant spiders, now if you want to take some of the spiders out, whatever you want to do to redo this boss fight to make it more interesting, you want to have the spiders ambush people, there's different things you can do there. But him and 2 bugbears, I don't know, man. Or give him 2 giant spiders and 2 bugbears, then I don't know, something. But I don't like that. They did change his actual stat block a bit. I think it is for the better. The original one is, and keep in mind, a lot of what they're changing in 5e is changing spell casting to where instead of having the enemy uses spell slots, they just, hey, once per day you can use these, or 3 times per day you can use this, and they give them like auto attack spells, which I love because as a DM, I don't like running creatures with spell slots. I just don't like keeping track of all that crap the same way I do with a player, because I've got all this other crap I have to, get multiple monsters. Typically, when you're running a spellcaster, it's part of a major fight where there's multiple creatures running around, so it's a lot to keep track of. So he had Mage Armor, Magic Missile, Shield, Invisibility, Suggestion, which is a cool spell. He did a Fairy Fire once per day. Otherwise, just had a staff, which he would never use. So he had a couple spells. None of them are like, as good as the Flame Skull, frankly. The new and AC 11, but 14 with Mage Armor, 27 hit points. I believe all that's the same. Yeah, his defense is the same. However, now, instead of his staff, he makes 2 Poison Blast attacks, which he can do in melee or ranged, have an average of +5 to hit and 9 damage, automatically making him more of a just putting out that damage if you didn't want to cast a spell. I do like that change. That's something that's more modern 5e, where it helps the DM just streamline the process of running a spellcaster, basically. So thumbs up to that. I believe his spells are the same, but if you notice he no longer uses spell slots, it's just, hey, once per day he can do a Fairy Fire, Invisibility, Magic Missile, Suggestion. Like, that's also great. I will accept that. He can cast Web and Spider Climb from Spider Staff as well, but that's just an easier way to run it. Fine. I do think he needs a lot more hit points. If he's a spellcaster boss at 4th level, the boss of the dungeon, I would give him, at least, what is max? 48 hit points, so at least in the 40s for hit points. And I would probably have the giant spiders back in there. I don't know why we lost those, so that's kind of a bummer. And that's basically the end of the comparison where we break it down. Again, the story is pretty much this. It is the exact same as far as I'm aware. And if somebody's read through both of them exactly and can tell me if there were specific story changes that were made. If anything, we lost a little bit of story context. One weird one that I did catch was the Mormisk, the Wraith, has this big long notes about how to role play him. Where is he? I think it was 14. Okay, so look at 14. This is the new version. You only have a couple of things here describing, basically nothing. Essentially, anger, poison, soul, transforming into hate-filled apparition, and then it just describes like the room in general. The original one, however, if we go to room number 14, has this huge sidebar of role-playing Mormisk and speaks in grave whispers and rises from the floor and does all that. Like, why did we lose that? Unless it's somewhere in a sidebar, but I'm not seeing it. So I thought that was pretty disappointing. These are important things, and it really helps a new DM, learn how to, role play encounters, because I think combat is, pretty functional in terms of just learning things, but that, the rules, but the role play is a lot harder to teach somebody. It's just something you learn from practice, but also from getting all these useful notes about how to role play and act out these different scenes. And this is a fun case of allowing a monster to actually have a social cutscene with the players first, at least before having a battle. So that was weird that we kind of lost that context. I wonder if some things just got cut. We needed to shorten things up so that we could fit the entire second half of the adventure in there, and I think that's a bummer. So originally my review was like, oh, this is the definitive version of Lost Mine of Phandelver. It's better in every way, because I was looking mainly at the aesthetic changes, the new maps, which are amazing, the new tokens, which are mostly amazing. The Doppelganger one is probably the most bummer, but a lot of them are way, way better. I don't know if all of the actual rebalance changes are better, though. In fact, you probably from this video heard me say more negatives than positives about the changes they made. Replacing the Wyvern Tor orcs with bugbears is a bummer. Adding a lot of more goblin bosses, I think, is a little bit of a challenge. I'm not sure how much the Redbrand ruffian change makes, but it's probably better. I don't know about doubling the skeletons in that one room. Changing the owlbear to the grell is definitely a good one. And in this one, I don't think there's really enough to mention, although they added, again, like those poisonous snakes to certain dungeons. This was already kind of a showcase for a lot of monsters in combat. So I don't think adding more, replacing stuff is okay, and changing it and rebalancing. I don't think adding more battles where we didn't need battles before. I mean, now I think Wave Echo Cave has literally a monster in almost every single room, and this is a 20-room dungeon. That's pretty crazy. And then losing the giant spiders in the final room is certainly a bummer. Losing the ash puff from the zombies, I agree it might have been a little too strong as written, but I think you could have kept that with a different, just debuffed it instead of removing it altogether. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't say I agree with all the changes they made for the better, and I'm not sure if that means this is the definitive version. I'm sure the best version is some kind of combination of those two. I still think this version is really great to get for Roll20 because of the new maps and the tokens and the entire second half, which wasn't even part of this video, but the entire second half of the adventure, which has all these other maps in it. I mean, there's 30 some maps in total here, are awesome. It's amazing. I have just probably nothing bad to say about that entire second half. But if you were only going to run Lost Mine of Phandelver, is it worth getting this new version versus the other one, which is significantly cheaper? I think that's harder, and hopefully with this video, you'll be able to make that informed decision yourself. All right, thank you for watching this video. You can watch more reviews, follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brennan, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Koa 1337, Big Nut, John F, John L, Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp, Christelli, Counselor, Andrew, Daryl, the Reldrin, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, Jason C, and Jason T. And gold patrons RPG, Papercraft, Pretty Boy, and Human, Deadless, Lion, Sam, Love You Buds, Jerome, Nathan, Faz, like a Tortoise, Scott, Revis, Carolyn, Jerry, and Thomas. Thank you all very much for your support.